we have kept that this is the structure of justification by faith, and we've made justification by faith, we've not grounded it in, we've not been aware that it's the structure of love. And so that's one of the richness of that. You see that? So all of a sudden, justification by faith is grounded in the very structure of love. So it is not merely a doctrine that is at the heart of our Christian freedom, but it is something, it's a map for how to live. And Philemon is a fascinating book to study with this grid in mind. I have several inductive studies of Philemon, and I love to people, forget this guy as our Protestant Satan. Let's interview him on what we have in America, Dr. Phil or Oprah or something, he's clearly codependent. Because Paul wants to take Onesimus's place. He expects Philemon to take. Everybody is taking one another's place. In other words, the gospel is so part of Paul, it describes his whole life as a dying love. And, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, the first 5 chapters are sort of a description of Paul's dying life. But he drills down into it in 4:8 through 10, where, he says, we're constantly being given over to death for your sake. So we are constantly dying, so you're constantly resurrecting. Philippians 3 is probably one of the clearest statements of it, where he first disowns his old righteousness. And then there's that great Reformation passage where, where he wants to know the righteousness of Christ. So we're Philippians 3, 1 to 11, where he wants to know the righteousness of Christ and be found in him, not with the righteousness of my own that's from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ. And then we freeze at the next verse. And that's where this dying love comes in, that where Paul says, I want to know the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. That's a passion for Paul. And as soon as I understood that, I understood the early church's passion for martyrdom. And that's just the pinnacle of it, as it were, martyrdom. But if your whole experience as a Christian is a dying love, and this is particularly strong in America, where we want the gospel to be like the equivalent of a second car. You know what I mean? We value the gospel, we love it, it makes us feel good about ourselves, it gets into heaven, but it's not my whole life. A math illustration, which doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but in kind of my it's kind of like with Paul the Apostle, the gospel is the bottom half of the equation, and kind of all of life is up here. In other words, the gospel defines all of life. Oops, I said that wrong. But anyway, and then particularly in America, kind of the American dream, the gospel is the top of the equation, and it's kind of my life, and then it's another piece of my life. But for Paul, it's everything. We know that for Paul it's everything. But it is, so just a quick way of summarizing this is to say, I just like this little short phrase, is we believe the gospel, and this is technically not theologically correct, the second thing here. I'm just explaining that ahead of time, but I like the way it rhymes. And we become the gospel. To really be theologically correct, you would have to insert the word like here. But I like the punch of become the gospel. So we enter into the dying life of Christ. So something like studying the Passion then helps me remap how I view life. So it resets my expectations. So my expectation is that, and I'm going to go ahead and get into let me just jump into point 3 here, which is the gospel itself, because I've already started on this point 3 and didn't even realize it. Point 3 on the gospel itself is that the gospel, looks like I just misspelled gospel. Okay. That the gospel itself, it is a number of things at a number of levels, but at the very simplest, when Paul describes the gospel in 1 Corinthians 15, he tells a story about a person. And that story has a particular shape to it. And it is, and when he describes the gospel in Philippians 2 and invites us into it, it has this shape to it. So the gospel is a story of a person. So it's the story of Jesus, his life, his death, and his resurrection. And we'll just abbreviate that there, since I'm writing too small. So so the gospel actually has a trajectory to it. So the gospel is. You could define the gospel as. Let me go. It is a slogan. Jesus died for my sins and rose for my justification. Or you can even just say it simply as Jesus died on the cross for my sins. And you can even reduce the slogan, as we do in our hymns, to Jesus saves. And you can even reduce that slogan even shorter, just to one word, Jesus. It's all those things, but it is also a story. And we have rightly focused on the gospel as a propositional truth. That has divided us from liberalism. And thank God for it. If an author doesn't get that straight, I'm really cautious when I read him. But we've neglected that it is this, we've neglected the story side of the gospel. And that's something that we're inviting people to. So we've given people the wrong expectations of the Christian life. So the expectations of the Christian life is that the shape of your life should be death and resurrection. In sense, your whole life. Let me just give you a quick example of this. A couple popped ahead to mind. We were at a camp over the summer with families with disabled children. And at Johnny Erickson camp, I don't know, you might be familiar with some of her writing, but she runs these camps across the United States. It's just a great time to be together. And there's a lot of helpers at the camp that just kind of help you take care of your kid during the day. And one of the helpers was, I think, slandered by a parent. I don't know for sure. And it just didn't, what this parent, and the parent did it kind of behind the woman's back, and she had paid money to go there for a week to help kids, and then she's slandered by the parent. Okay, it sort of takes the joy out of the whole thing a little bit. It's like having the proverbial rug pulled out from under your feet. Here I am sacrificing, and then I'm slandered. And I was genuinely excited for her. Now you're going to really think I'm odd. I said, because I have been in situations like that, and I know the dynamic of the Spirit. I said, and I invited her into the dying and resurrection life of Jesus. And I said, now, I said, when I've been in situations like that, they purify my motives, because I have to die, because there is a real joy. You get a real joy from helping disabled adults, and knowing that you're really helping the parents. And you know that they're thanking you, they're blessing you, and there's a little bit of human glory, and it's not a bad thing, but I said, now that's all gone. You have no positive reasons to be here. You have to just love for Jesus. So your human glory is just absolutely stripped about it, and you've got to now do this action only for him. And what that does is it strips out of you your pride. And I said, you are having the privilege to enter into the dying life of Christ. And this is a gift to you. And I have had these strange gifts handed to me. And look how that remaps your life. It doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't at all mean that what that person was right, or that you shouldn't try to fix it or anything like that. And she did, and none of that worked. You're still left with, this kind of stain on your reputation. So suffering then is not strange, as Peter says in 1 Peter 5. It is part of the normal paradigm of the Christian life. So we expect to be entering into the dying of Christ. So Paul says, I bear on my body the very marks of Jesus. And what he's probably referring to is the beatings he's received, and that he's received at the hands of both the Romans and his fellow Jews. So it is just so things like Colossians 1:24 all of a sudden make sense. Where Paul says in Colossians 1:24, they'll probably butcher it, but something like where he says, I fill up this is Paul speaking, I fill up what is lacking in Christ's affliction for the sake of his body, the church. And we think, oh, Paul, we like you, but we don't like that. I mean, what are you saying? There's something lacking in Christ's affliction? Now, because it's from Paul that we learn that Christ's death is once for all. And, of course, his disciple who wrote the book of Hebrews. So why are you talking about something lacking in Christ's affliction? Well, if you see that the gospel is something we believe, and then what we do with it, we become the gospel, we enter into the dying of Christ, now that makes sense. Jesus' death for my wife is finished. It's once for all. My death needs to be for her every day, every week. And I think instinctively we know that. For Jesus' death that he offers for India is once and for all. And for India to know Christ, someone has to die. Or for the pieces of India, we have to enter into the dying of Christ. So now, and what this does is the gospel isn't something you believe, it's what you live. And well, you know what it eliminates at the very quickest is sort of low-level Christian crankiness. It just cuts it off at the feet. That you have no theology of crankiness anymore. It's just gone. It's vaporized. And another things that, as Paul says in Romans 3, you get it right. I had to look at the picture on my ESV Bible. The gospel kills boasting. Believing the gospel undercuts all boasting. Becoming the gospel undercuts all crankiness. I mean, you have no constitutional right to crankiness anymore. I mean, because you expect to be irritated. And then out of the pressure of your life comes the beauty of Jesus. I mean, that's when they're going to see your love. So as you encounter situations like Jesus did at the Last Supper where no one's washed the feet, an unfair situation, because love is always unfair. That's the very nature of love. It's identical to grace. The very nature of love is to be uneven. So as you encounter uneven things during the day, unfair things, that's where that pressure, the unjustness of it, is where the beauty of Jesus begins to emerge from you as you become a lover of people. And what a great thing to look forward to. Number 4, we've already kind of done this, is that on the raises the bar on love, and we've talked enough about this just to say that the love really. This is all on love that I'm saying here. Is that incarnation? To incarnate becomes a way of life. To cultivate, and that whole thing I did on that little brief thing I did on Ephesians 4, where I think sometimes we miss the 30,000-foot view on that. This is an incredible call to love. Or like Philippians 2, in both the beginning of Philippians 2 and the middle, where Paul's talking about what we're like in the world, is that we begin to see how incredible love is, and that it's just all the time. We learn you actually, for instance, I mean, one more quick example, and it's not a specific example. It's